In this example, I'm just going to go through creating a simple chocolate shader. And I've got my standard default scene with my low poly human figure here. But to do the shading, I'm going to go up to my shaders workspace here. And my workspaces will be different to yours because I've been adding a load of custom workspaces. But you should have a shaders. And if I click on that, here we can see a divide, and in the bottom panel I will set it, well, at the moment it's set to the material preview, so I'll leave it at that for the moment. And also note I do have an HDRI set up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it at Eevee for the moment, and Eevee gives me a faster result, but Cycles will give me a better looking result. But let's leave it on Eevee for the moment. And there is no material on here. And if I go to the material setup here, you can see there's no material here. Again, you can ignore these other things that I've got installed. And I will click on new here, or you can do new on the right, but I'll do it on the top. I'll wait for there you go. And I'm going to change the divider here. I want to see more of this. And I'm going to call this chocolate. And what I'm going to do is I don't need the principal BSDF. And by the way, I'm working in Blender 365, and at the moment Blender 4 has come out, but I can't run it on my current machine. But this should work the same in the latest version of Blender. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a diffuse. So I just did a Shift A, or you can come up here to add as well. And I want a shader, and I want a diffuse shader, and I want a glossy. I don't need all the principal BSDF stuff. So shader, glossy. And I need to mix these two together. And oh, now if I can remember the shortcut. Nope. I've got Node Wrangler set. And nope, not that one. And no, there's a shortcut to mix them together. There you go. There we go. So control. So I'll do that again. Now I've got the Node Wrangler set up. So under the edit menu and preferences, if I go to add-ons and type in Node, here's Node Wrangler. And this is inbuilt to Blender, so you'll all have it, but it's usually off by default. So I go here, switch it on, and this gives me various shortcuts. And one of them is Control Shift and not left click as I just did, but Control Shift right drag. And as you can see here from one node to the other, it drops a mix shader in. Or I could do Shift A, shader, and mix. And I'll put these two now to the surface. And there you go. I've got something, not a lot, but if I choose diffuse is sort of like the default color. So if I choose something like that, and I can make it darker, and glossy is to make things glossy or not. So automatically now you can see I've almost got a chocolate shader there, but we're going to make it a little bit fancier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few more nodes, nothing major. So I'll do Shift A. Now, if I can't find things, if I can't remember, when I click on search, I can just type in, and I'm going to do, I want a brightness contrast. There you go. I also want Shift A, and I can go to color, and here we've got a load of color stuff, converter, all sorts of things here. But if I do a search for, let's have a look, RGB, there we go, standard color wheel there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this color. So I'm going to copy this color. Now I'm going to roll over it. I'm just going to do Command C or Control C on the PC, roll over here, Command V or Control V. I don't have to click or anything else like that. That's quite handy in Blender, just to roll over and copy, move somewhere else, roll over and paste. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this color to the diffuse here, and you see there's no difference. If I want to, I can see it's still working. but I'm also going to input the color to the brightness contrast, and I'm going to dump this into the glossy color here. There we go. And I can play around with the glossy, and also notice we have roughness values as well. So let's increase the brightness, not so much. Let's have a look. It's something like that. And I can play around with the contrast if I want, you can see, but I'll leave that alone. And the roughness on the diffuse I'll set to 0, but I can move that and change that, which is not making much of a difference. But the roughness on the glossy makes a bit different, so you can see how it looks there. And I'm going to reduce that down, something like that maybe. And I will leave this as the standard glossy or the default GGX. That's fine, although you can muck around with that if you want. And we also have another couple of options. The normal, which is sort of the bump, how rough things are, or how sort of like a sort of fake 3D effect, a bump effect. And I also want to play around with the factor of the mix shader. Now with the mix shader, the factor is like a mask. And if I drag it all one way, I will get 1, you see. And if I drag it the other way, I will get the other, the glossy. So drag it all the way to the left, you get the top, and drag it all the way to the right, you get it to the bottom. But I'm going to play around with that. I'm going to input something else. And what I'm after is, I just did Shift A again, layer weight. And this will change things according to the view. I'm going to use the facing output, and I'll drag that to the fact. And I want some texture coordinates as well. Shift A input texture coordinate. And I want it the normal, basically, of the texture. And there we go. And now we're starting to get something a little bit better. And if you look on the edges, you'll get a different result compared to more face on, which is what facing is. Fresnel is also another sort of form of edge effect, which doesn't make so much sense here. But if we had something glass or something like that, that would be useful. But I'll do it facing. Facing means I get one sort of effect on the mix shader. One of these, I think it's the top one, will be seen face on, but the more to the side of the view, the bottom one, which is the glossy here, you can see. And if I cut that, you can see the glossy disappears. But if I bring that in, the glossy appears more on the side. And we can try this. I'm going to input some other shapes. Let's put a diamond, a tad large, but let's put that to the chocolate. So we've got a few more faces. See, there's a lot of angles, and you see how it moves around. When I'm facing sort of the view, I get more of the diffuse, but the facing means on the edge when I'm sloping away, I get more of the glossy. So it works quite nice. It's quite a nice node for that. But I'm not finished yet. Obviously, I can play around with the options here, but I want to add a bit of bump because it's a bit shiny, too smooth. So I'm going to add as well, just to have a look, an icosphere, and let's set that 4 subdivisions. And I'm going to right mouse click or W key for me, shade smooth, and let's move it along. Let's make it smaller. Let's move it there, say somewhere like that. There we go. And let's move it up a bit. Let's give that the same as well, and so we can see something a bit better. See, it is quite shiny, quite smooth, you see. And as you can see, though, the facing only works on a small area and it cuts off to the glossy very quickly. Well, that's what we've got with the blend option. So let's drag that up and you'll see very quickly, bang, there's no front face. I haven't got the diffuse anymore. But let's knock that down. And I'm going to knock that down quite a lot. Let's try Let's go. There you go. There you go. You see, something like that. By the way, when I'm dragging here, if you just drag left and right, it's quite a big jump. But if you hold the shift key down at the same time, it's a lot smaller increments. Let's go back there. So now I'm getting a much nicer result. I've still got sort of these shiny bits on the side, but I've still got a nice front-facing sort of diffuse chocolate color. And we're almost done. I just want something for the normal, which is basically the bump. So I'm going to add, I need a bump node. Now, the bump nodes is a vector node, so Shift A, vector, bump. And I'll drag them both because I want them both to be affected at the same time to the glossy, the shiny, and the diffuse, the non-shiny. And we are going to add a noise to this. I could add a noise direct, but this is the normal input we want to play around with. Or I could have added a noise to the roughness, but I'm going to add it to the normal. So the noise is just texture and noise, but you also have Musgrave, wave texture, and there's a few others, but I'll just do noise. And although it gives me a color output, normals, the color is irrelevant, so I need to convert it. So Shift A and converter and RGB to black and white. So we'll go the color input to there, and then a value to the height. The height is what we want. Now let's see what we get. It's taking a few seconds on my machine. It should be faster than yours. There you go. Oh, well, actually, if you want it really bumpy, there you go. Sort of like a Ferrero Rocher or something like that. But of course, you can change these. So let's decrease the scale. And you see what happens? Let's dump it down to about 1. You know, something like that. So can you see what we've got? Very nice. And I can play around with the detail. This is like a secondary effect on top, or I can take it off. So I'll leave it at the default for 2. And the roughness we can muck around with as well. And I'll reduce that a bit. But again, you can play around. And distortion if you want. But again, I'll leave that off. And this is now our simple chocolate shader. We have a mix shader mixing a diffuse and glossy. How they're mixed is down to the factor input. The factor input comes from the layer weight node. The layer weight node blends between the top and the bottom according to the amount here, and we're using the facing output, which means as we face, we see the top, the diffuse, but as we go off to the side, we see the bottom, the glossy. And the blend is the amount between the two. And the normal comes from the normal from the texture from the item concerned. And the color comes from an RGB setup, nice and straightforward, with a simple brightness contrast for playing around with the glossy. You can change these, of course. You can add an RGB curves. If I did Shift A, converter, you can see we've got all sorts here. Color ramp I could have used. There you go. I'll get rid of that. That was X delete. And we've also got, we've got a whole load of things. Where's me? Let's have a look. Curves. Oh, here we go. RGB curves, just like you'd find in Photoshop, which is the whole color or red or green or blue. And you can change these as well and use it to muck around the input. You just drag it in the middle if you so wish, and then you can muck around. I'll wait for it to come up, and you can muck around with these. Can you see? Or you can just change the red and so on. But I'll get rid of that. I don't need that. But this is now our simple chocolate shader.